thanks so much for being willing to sit with me and just chat. I'm hopeful that there'll be quite a few others that will be able to see this as we put it out. I know that you've been in the project for a long, long time and have had a lot of different roles. I'd like to start just in a more personal place. Share with me how you got to the weekend. When was that? And I know the project was probably called something different. Bring me back in time to that time of your life.
Well, I did the weekend in January, February 1988.
Yeah.
And I was about warrior number 250. It was the third year they were doing it. They had just started doing separate Chicago, Milwaukee weekends. And I had gotten involved in men's stuff in about 85 with the Young Association up here in Minneapolis, and then the Robert Bly retreats. So I've been to a couple of Robert Bly retreats and had seen, I think Rich Tosi came to one of them. And Bill Koff had come to a men's conference we put on up in Minneapolis. And I hadn't been terribly impressed with them. I was separated, going through divorce, and I went through a particularly tough time in the fall of '87, and was going to go do the forum actually, and called a friend who'd done it and who'd been bugging me like crazy to do it, as they do. And he said, "Oh, I just got back from the warrior training. Forget the forum. Go do the warrior training." I said, "Okay." And that was December, January. So I went to the next one, which is like January 31st, February 1st in Milwaukee. There were 3 of us who went, and it was transformative. I mean, Bly was talking about shame and recovering from shame, but the warrior training for me was an antidote to shame. I found it very powerful and very, for the first time I understood I had feelings, but feelings, it was okay to have feelings, what feelings were for. I could express my feelings. And I kind of got the weekend during the brother dance. They brought us in blindfolded to take the blind, and I see a bunch of naked guys dancing on the fire, and I just felt like I was home finally.
Yeah.
And the process, the guts facilitation, wasn't particularly good at my weekend. I didn't, other than getting a sore rib cage and it hurt to breathe for a couple of weeks after that. I wouldn't say that was what was transformative, but it was a whole experience of being vulnerable, telling the truth, and being affirmed for that rather than shamed for that.
Yeah. So tell me about the antidote for shame. Shame's such a big deal for most of us. I know it is for me and many, many men I've talked to. So you said it was an antidote to shame.
Yeah. The experience I got was one of sharing something that I was ashamed of, and was afraid I'd be reviled for, and instead was being blessed for having the courage to share it.
Oh, wow.
And that happened a couple of times on the weekend. And the whole process of the weekend constantly reinforced that I was okay the way I was. And whether it was my sexuality or whether it was my dysfunction or whatever it was, that I was okay the way I was. And that I could tell the truth, and that the fact that it was my truth, it was valued. And I've never been affirmed like that before in my life.
Actually started to happen from you on the weekend. This got this in a deep place.
Yeah, much more than, the Bly retreats have been helpful. They were the kind of beginnings of that. And I came back and told guys about it, and a couple of them came, but most of them weren't interested. They were very kind of invested in the men's council stuff and the Bly stuff. A few of them, once we started the trainings up in Minnesota, probably a half dozen or dozen of them did come, but the inner circle never did. And I was kind of ostracized for going off the
Yeah.
Yeah, going off the reservation. Well, I came back, and for there was something where there was some meeting, and I was there with a relatively small group with Robert,
Mhm.
and I told him about the way I told him about it. In fact, I said, Robert, there's I experienced this antidote to shame at the warrior training. He said, "Oh, good, tell me about it. Well, let's steal it. We'll do it." I said, you can't. It's a group thing. You know, and he didn't like being told he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I wasn't that, they would have prevented him, but it's not a one-man show.
Yeah. It's much more. Do you think that part of what grounds the weekend and the work we're doing is the heart-based part? You know, that so much of it is connecting,
Yeah.
from heart to heart, and in there's some sort of opening that occurs.
Yeah, very much. And it's very much opening men's hearts and giving men access to their feelings, to their emotions.
Yeah.
For most men, and for me, emotions were a problematic, got in the way of my thinking and I didn't know what to do with them. And I was, whenever they showed up, they were usually a problem. And on the weekend and subsequent work, I discovered that emotions have information and energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned, they weren't a problem. They were telling me something, and I got energy from them.
Uh-huh.
And so they were a resource. And in fact, I discovered that the way to become connected with someone was to share my feelings, not my thoughts.
Yeah.
And women especially like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it really transformed my relationships with women as well as with men.
Yeah.
Because I realized that the way to relate to anybody is on the emotional level.
So part of what you got was a deeper way to relate, and what you learned was that particularly women, but men as well, connected more deeply in that way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So you've been all over the project in terms of leadership. I know that you're a full leader
yes.
for the weekend. I know that you were the chair. Tell me a few other things that you've done along the way.
Well,
like 40 years you've been doing this.
Yeah, well, 32, 33. Oh, God.
98, 2008, 2000.
Well, 31 with MKP, 33 in men's work.
Okay.
Well, in 1988, 89, they asked me to join the board. So there was a New Warrior adventure, and it was Kauth and Tosi and Herring, and they were kind of managing it out of their back pocket. And about 89, and I was going back and forth staffing a lot, and they were excited that I had connections with Bly and could bring some of that into the network.
Bly wanted stuff, and we wanted stuff.
Yeah, it went both ways. And so they decided they needed to form a board, something to kind of oversee and manage the work. So there were six men, the three founders, two guys from Chicago, and myself. There was David Lindgren, Michael Greenwald, and myself.
Uh-huh.
And David and Michael had been active longer than I have, and were on the verge of leading weekends. They were kind of co-leading weekends.
Uh-huh.
And they were kind of wondering who the hell this guy was. And, I
know what that's like.
Yeah. So one of the things I did, the first meeting was they were, it had started to break. The men from Houston had come up, and they wanted them to bring it to Houston. Men from California had come. They wanted to, and so I suggested that they develop a leadership training. And they said, "Oh, no, we couldn't train. You couldn't train people to do this. We couldn't." I said, "Oh, all right." I said, and I said, "Well, so what would you really like to do?" "Well, we'd really like to go take the work to California and to Texas, And he said, "Well, why don't you?" "Well, because we have to lead all these trainings here. If only we had some other men who could help lead the trainings here. If only we could train some men to do that." And so they came up with the idea on their own to start a leadership training. And David and Michael were to the point of co-leading weekends. And so they realized that you could learn, because these two guys learned. So you didn't have to be one of the three founders. And one of them, I think, geniuses of the weekend and of the founders was a willingness to give it away, a willingness to share it, let other men participate at the level of leading the weekend, which other things like this haven't done. I mean, Justin Sterling does his thing, but he's the only one who leads it. Nobody else can lead it.
Yeah.
Nobody else. Well, actually, Robert Bly was generous in bringing other men into his retreats, but he was always the headliner. Right. And so Rich and Bill were very generous in bringing other men in and Ron as well, to train them to lead the weekend. So that was one of the things that I think was transformative about this particular work, and why it's had the staying power it's had. Because all that other stuff is gone. Yeah. And,
well, they still have that quality of wanting to give it away, keep giving it away. So tell me, you've seen so many changes. Tell me what you think about where we are. You've been through the period of time when we almost weren't gonna be anymore, and then changed through unification into being different than we were for a number of years. And of course, each of those steps have their own complicated pieces to it. So you've witnessed and experienced and mentored us through that, many of those things. What do you think about where we are and where we're going?
Well, I part of the generosity was to create it as a nonprofit, which meant that all the centers then incorporated as their separate nonprofits, which gave them a sense of ownership, but was a nightmare for managing it. I mean, nonprofits can't own each other. You had no clear management structure the way you would with a for-profit organization. So that led to eventually the unification idea that we would be one nonprofit umbrella for everybody.
Right.
That meant we had 25 nonprofits that had to stop operating.
Right.
And
that was a good thing. You believe that was a good thing?
Oh yeah. Oh, it was an absolutely necessary thing. I mean, everybody was volunteer. We had 25 what are they called 990s had to be filed every year. Every year somebody messed one up. Somebody. Because and every year somebody was borrowing money from the kitty to, and then couldn't pay it back. Or every year there was no real malfeasance, but there was a lot of low-level incompetence or whatever.
Yes.
And so we replaced that with a much more professional structure, and that was absolutely necessary.
So there's a couple more things, but what I'm hearing you say is that was really a good move that we made that really basically saved us from going upside down.
Yeah.
That's my.
Yeah, because we grew, and I ran the numbers because I'm an engineer. We grew at a compound rate of 22% a year from the time they started till 1996. And that nearly bankrupted us. 1996, the project was, because they weren't retaining enough to pay for infrastructure. They nearly went belly up. And they had executive director for 3.5 years. They had he voluntarily stepped aside, and we put in some financial controls, and they just weren't retaining enough earnings to pay for stuff. And so we rebuilt it from there. And the challenge of something like this is keeping the quality high. Yeah. The training is the same every place. And we've succeeded in doing that.
Yeah, it sure feels like that.
And that was really important. And that was something we paid a lot of attention to. The training be of high quality. It's not exactly the same necessarily, but so the same high quality everywhere you go, and safe everywhere you go.
Yeah. So where do you think we're going? And then I want to talk to you a little bit about curriculum, but what's
Yeah.
next? What do you see 10 years down the road?
Well, I see. We've done. I see two things. I mean, the training itself is great for interpersonal inside me, personal inside me, and interpersonal between,
Right.
individuals. And we've done a lot of good work culturally, and we're still doing it.
Yeah.
At the three levels of that model, the institutional level, we haven't done such a good job at. And so we need to develop more institutional competence.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a handful of guys that are doing almost all that work.
Yeah.
We need to have more guys come to that level.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is integral. I think integral is showing us a way forward for what kinds of things to add into what we're doing, and not that we're gonna become Wilburites necessarily, but it does give us a map, a model for going forward, and I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, and you're part of a group that have been putting together and it's pretty almost complete a training, not a training, but an educational piece around that.
Yeah, some videos and stuff, and integral's a lot of different stuff, but there's really two pieces that are really useful, most practical. One is quadrants,
right?
The other is the levels or spiral dynamics. And those are the insights from those are very powerful and help men move beyond the insights they get from doing their personal work and work in relationships.
Yeah.
So bringing that in and disseminating it, I think, is what we need to do the next 10 years. And it really is where we're going.
Yeah, and that's a group of men that have been working on that, led by Rich Tosi, right?
Right. One of the founders, Rich Tosi. And in fact, almost all the men in that group are ex-chairmen.
Yeah. And amazing leaders at the same time. So Rich has his hands full with that.
Yeah. So it's kind of a confab of I'm sorry, ex-chairman. Did I say leaders? They're all ex-chairman of the project.
Former chairman. Yeah.
So some of whom are NWTA leaders. But one of the things that we have learned and internalized is that there's different kinds of leadership, and it's great to lead the weekend, and that's
right.
I've grown tremendously in having to learn to do that and confront my own ego. But there's other kinds of leadership too, including the leadership of the project, which is a different skill set.
Right.
And we're coming to value that, and that's very good. That's part of that institutional competence I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, another thing I would really like to chat about for a little bit is you were a part of a group that launched the curriculum part of the organization that's been around not real long. And it's I got the opportunity when Julian stepped aside to lead that for almost a year on my way to this role. And it's what I loved about what it was meaning was that we had the weekend that's you spoke to what that brings for us. And then we had the I groups, men's circles that kept us really working together and deepening that work. Now comes a curriculum, which gives us the opportunity to go in a lot of different directions in different ways. So tell me, you've been on that. Tell me about that. Are you excited about what that means?
Yeah, I am, because we had this one great thing, the warrior training, and the things around it, the leadership training, the staff training. But the curriculum committee gives us a chance to say, well, what else should men do when you've mastered these skills? And you may or may not want to go on and lead a weekend, but what else should you do? So we looked around and said, well, there's other people doing some really good trainings, and we want to partner with them.
Right.
And maybe we want to develop some second level trainings or third level trainings ourselves, but what's missing? First, let's see what's out there. and so we partnered with a number of really excellent trainings, the Noble Man, the Jerry training about gender equity,
Gender equity.
The Next Step, which was started by and Shadow Work, which is both ex warrior leaders, early warriors founded and developed. So so we can give men kind of a smorgasbord stamp of approval of things to go broaden themselves with.
Yeah.
So we don't. It's important for us not to be a one-trick pony, not to be too insular.
Yeah.
Not to just,
Yeah. So we have
each other.
in the curriculum we have curriculum that is ours, and then curriculum that we partnered with, like Animus Valley, Jerry,
Right.
some of these other pieces. Now I'm thinking I'm understanding that virtual trainings are something that you guys are kind of working with more and more. And
yeah, that's a relatively new thing, and Boyce and Hodgson and some other men have really pioneered that. Virtual live groups offering stuff online, and that is turning out to be an excellent way to give men a taste of the work, give them some basic skills, and they're turning that many men, probably I think they something like 40-50% who experience that want to go on and do the weekend.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of face-to-face experiential stuff that's much more powerful. But this is having a huge impact. Plus, then, men are far-flung, and maybe they don't have 6 to 10 guys in their immediate vicinity to have an I group, can be in an online I group and get the same benefit online as you can from getting together face-to-face in somebody's living room.
Yeah. That's me. I travel quite a bit.
Yeah.
I have actually 2 virtual I groups that I attend, as well as my face-to-face one. And but in the market right now, I mean, I get stuff because I am see myself kind of as a learner person, and virtual trainings, virtual classes, virtual study groups, it's huge. I mean, I get stuff in all the time.
Yeah, it's exploding. They're almost all the same in that you're listening to somebody lecture you or something. Very few of them have a participation component. Some do. But our work based on our experiential learning, I think makes the online richer, and then points to, after you've done some online work, here's some place to go to deepen it experientially.
Right.
And I think that's really important. Online is great, but it'll only do so much. But together with experiential stuff, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, we could deliver a good chunk of our leadership training online if we were so inclined.
So tell me how your life has changed since 1989, 88.
Oh God. Well, I'm a much better father. I finally knew how to have meaningful relationships with women, and have had in a 25-year plus relationship as a result of that. I became a better person, a better friend, a better, and I try to live my life with 2 touchstones of compassion and generosity. And I'm very grateful for what I've now learned within the warrior training and MKP, but the doors and windows it opened for me.
Yeah.
As a result of that, I did some work with a Zen teacher for several years. I've done other work that has really enriched my life a great deal.
Right.
It's hard to, there's not one thing.
No.
But it all started with the warrior training.
Right. So do you feel more comfortable in your own skin? Do you feel comfortable with yourself?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Do you have anything you want to tell us all anything you want to share? Any little bits of not wisdom and gold that for?
Oh God, yeah. Usually I have all kinds of things I want to. My shadow mission is knowing more than you do and telling you about it.
Oh, good. See how that works.
Yeah, this work is an antidote to shame.
Yeah.
And it helps men, as you said, be comfortable in their own skin. And as a leader, my mission as a leader is to empower each man to discover the genius within himself, because we all have a genius within ourselves.
Yeah.
We all have some that spark the divine, and we can discover it and bring it forward.
Yeah.
And that's I feel blessed to have spent as much time doing that as I've been able to.
Yeah. Well, again, I really appreciate you being willing to sit with me for a little while. And
it's been fun.
I see regularly the genius, the times that we spent at LOMG, rocking in the rocker. By the way, you're the kind of man that will give you the shirt off your back, and I have experienced. I should have wore that today, but you gave me that T-shirt that was one of the originals, I think, and my wife loves it when I wear that. By the way,
good. I'm glad. I'm glad.
I want you to know how much you've touched my life in the time I've known you, from meeting you for the first time in a bigger way with a curriculum group, and then getting to know you more and more. I feel your support. I feel your generosity and your love, and it makes a huge difference in the work I'm doing, and really helps me feel better. And what I do know is you've touched hundreds and hundreds of men's lives. I've talked to other chairs. I've talked to other men who have nothing but great things to say from their hearts about you. So you do and really share your genius in the way you love and the way you support. And we would not be here without you. We just would not. And it's men like you that are what makes this really, really.
Yes.
So thank you very much, David.
You're very welcome
for everything.
And thank you for stepping up. I know. Well, when I was chair, it was a lot less work and it was much easier job. So, but I understand the effort and the sacrifice it is to do that, and I thank you for doing it.
You're very welcome, and I'm appreciating doing it most of the time. I have the pleasure of being in a situation where I've moved into my elder part of my life, elderhood. So the challenge for me has been, how do I stay in that energy at the same time as the energy that's required by and I'm finding that it really works fine. So anyway, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And we'll see each other again soon.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, you bet.
Bless you.